Sleepy Capy and Hope, friends of the meadow. Once, in a soft green meadow beside a slow, silver river, there lived a capybara named Sleepy Capy. He was round and warm, with fur that smelled like sunshine and river grass. He wore a small blue blanket over one shoulder. The blanket was not for warmth. Sleepy Capy was never cold, but because it made him feel calm and safe. He kept it tucked under his chin when he napped and spread it out on the grass when he had a quiet picnic. Sleepy Capy loved slow things. He loved the way the clouds moved like big, gentle sheep in the sky. He loved the slow blinking of frogs on lily pads and the long, soft hum the river made as it slid past the meadow. Most of all, Sleepy Capy loved to nap. He could nap in the morning when the sun was new, in the middle of the day when the world was warm, and in the evening when stars blinked awake. Sometimes he even snuck in small naps while standing up, one eye closed and one eye open, so he wouldn't miss anything important. One bright morning, Sleepy Capy woke a little earlier than usual. The sun had already stretched its golden arms and the world smelled of dew and mangoes. Sleepy Capy blinked his sleepy eyes and sat up. He yawned a big, slow yawn that sounded like a cloud making room for the sky. As he rubbed the corner of his mouth with a paw, he heard a tiny, bell-like sound above his head. "Hello," sang a bright voice that twinkled with joy. Sleepy Capy looked up. Hovering in front of him was a tiny hummingbird. Her feathers glowed like a green jewel in the sunlight, and her wings were almost too quick to see. When she moved, they made a soft, musical sound like a tiny bell. She had a feather that stuck up like a little hat, and her eyes were full of quick, sparkling hope. "Hello," Sleepy Capy said back, smiling in the slow way he smiled. "Who are you?" "I'm Hope," the hummingbird said, tilting her head. "I live above the mango tree and in the sunflowers. I zoom and zip and sing little songs. Do you want to play?" Sleepy Capy blinked. "I like quiet things," he said, "and naps. I nap a lot." "Perfect," Hope chimed. "I like to fly fast, but I like quiet games too. We can both do what we like. Friends can do different things together." Sleepy Capy smiled a wide, slow smile. He liked that sentence very much. Friends can do different things together. He liked the sound of it, and the way it made his heart feel warm, like a cozy cup of tea. So Hope and Sleepy Capy decided to play. Of course, Sleepy Capy's idea of playing was different from Hope's. Hope wanted to zoom from sunflower to mango blossom and count the colours of butterflies. Sleepy Capy wanted to sit in the shade, feel the breeze, and watch the clouds slowly change their shapes. "We can both have what we like," Hope said, and she zipped up to a high branch and back in a blink. "We'll take turns, and we'll do things together." They started with a slow game. Hope perched on Sleepy Capy's soft blue blanket and sang tiny songs while Sleepy Capy closed his eyes and listened. The song sounded like little raindrops landing on leaves. Sleepy Capy hummed along in his very slow, low hum until he fell into a little nap. Hope watched him with careful eyes. She liked the feeling of keeping watch over a friend. When Sleepy Capy woke, stretched and yawned again, they played another game. Hope taught Sleepy Capy how to find the beading sunlight that shone through the mango leaves and how to hold it in his being like a warm pebble. Sleepy Capy taught Hope how to notice the tiny noises in the grass, the rustle of a beetle, the soft footstep of a crab near the river. Hope hovered close, trying to hear all the small sounds with Sleepy Capy's slow, good listening. Before long, other bird friends arrived to join them. A graceful swallow swooped down, looping in the air with a ribbon of speed. He was named Swoop. He loved to draw circles and then laugh when the circles made tiny wind songs. A plump little sparrow came hopping from the fence post. She had brown speckled feathers and bright, curious eyes. Her name was Pip. Pip loved stories and always wanted to know where Sleepy Capy's naps took him in his dreams. And then, from the tall reeds by the river, came a thin, long-legged crane who moved with soft dignity. Her name was Laura. She walked with her head held high and watched everything calmly. Laura liked quiet walks and gentle words, and she enjoyed telling stories about far-off ponds where moonlight looked like crushed silver. All the airborne friends gathered above Sleepy Capy's blanket. They talked softly and made plans that were warm and gentle. "We can have a picnic and a sky parade," Hope suggested, buzzing with ideas. "A picnic is perfect," Sleepy Capy said, "but a sky parade sounds splendid too. We can make the parade slow and soft." They arranged things carefully. Sleepy Capy spread his blue blanket on the grass and laid out a few bits of fruit: sweet mango slices, little pressed banana rounds, and a bowl of cool river water with floating flower petals. Hope brought tiny nectar cups for the smaller birds. Swoop swooped, making the breeze smell like fresh air. Pip told a short, funny story that made everyone chirp and chuckle. Laura told a calm tale about a pond where frogs hummed lullabies. As they ate and shared, Sleepy Capy felt a gentle warmth bubble inside him, the warmth of being together. It made him want to hum and sway softly like the river. He thought about how different his friends were, some quick like Hope and Swoop, some chatty like Pip, some quiet like Laura, and how each of them made the day brighter. After their slow picnic, Hope had an idea. "Let's play the friend-finding game," she said. "We'll all fly, or walk, to a place in the meadow and look for something small that needs help. Then we'll help it together. Ready?" "Ready," the birds agreed. Sleepy Capy nodded and thought for a moment. Then he stood carefully and began to amble toward the riverbank. He moved slowly, but each step was steady and sure. The birds hovered above him, filling the air with little whoops and notes. Near the leafy bank of the river, they found a small stick house of moss that had been knocked over by a playful wind. Inside it lived a family of tiny beetles. One beetle, named Brim, had rolled a little pebble that was too heavy for him to push back into the moss house. "Oh dear," piped Pip, fluttering her brown speckled wings. "That pebble looks sad and alone." Sleepy Capy walked up to the pebble and wriggled his whiskers. He nudged the pebble with his paw, and the pebble bumped back and rolled a tiny bit. Hope darted down and nudged it with her beak. Laura used her long legs to lift the moss house, and Swoop blew a soft breeze that helped the pebble roll. Together they pushed the pebble back into the moss home, where it fit like a tiny puzzle piece. Brim the beetle clicked his little mandibles in thanks and invited all the friends to taste a bit of sweet sap that smelled like the inside of a beehive. The sap was tiny but delicious, and everyone had a sip. "It feels nice to help," said Hope, her wings glowing with pleasure. "It feels nice to be helped," said Sleepy Capy, nibbling a mango slice with care. "I think helping and being helped are both good." They played the friend-finding game throughout the afternoon. Sometimes they found lost feathers that needed to be returned to nests. Sometimes they found a young caterpillar who wanted to be shown a safe leaf to sleep on. Sometimes they found a patch of flowers that needed a gentle song to help them open. For each thing they found, the friends did what they could. Some flew, some pushed, some sang, and everything felt easier when they worked together. The sky turned a soft blue to gold as the sun leaned toward the hill. Sleepy Capy yawned a long, satisfied yawn. The birds gathered around, making a gentle circle in the air. Laura told a slow story of silver ponds and frog lullabies. Hope hummed a tiny song that sounded like a bell. Even Swoop, who liked to laugh aloud, made slow, careful circles to watch the sun settle. When evening came, the meadow filled with a soft hush. Fireflies blinked like tiny lanterns. A cool breeze wandered through, carrying the smell of mango and river. Sleepy Capy smoothed his blue blanket on the ground and made a little nest. The birds hovered just above, and some of the smaller ones sat on the blanket beside Sleepy Capy. Hope perched gently on the tip of Sleepy Capy's nose and sang a small, sleepy song. "Will you stay close?" Sleepy Capy asked, with eyes half closed. "Always," Hope said, and her voice tinkled like a promise. It was in that soft moment that Sleepy Capy felt something new and very kind. He felt that being friends meant holding space for one another, walking slow when others needed slow steps, flying quick when others needed quick help, and sometimes being still so someone could nap. It meant listening and trying, and laughing when a beetle wore a sunflower petal for a hat. It meant sharing mango slices and nectar and stories. Night came gently like a warm blanket. The stars blinked on one by one, small dots of faraway light. The moon sighed up into the sky and wrapped the meadow with a cool silver glow. Sleepy Capy nestled his chin on his blanket and breathed in the smell of the river. Hope folded her wings and snuggled close. Swoop tucked his head under his wing and dreamed of long loose circles. Pip whispered a line from her favourite story, and Laura hummed a pond song that made the frogs croon along. The air was full of friends and gentle music. Sleepy Capy's eyes grew heavy. He thought of the day's small adventures. Pebbles rolled, moss houses mended, tiny songs sung, and felt happy in the quiet, simple way he always felt after good company. He thought of Hope's bright beak, of Swoop's windy laughter, of Pip's curious questions, and of Laura's calm stories. He felt thankful. As Sleepy Capy drifted into sleep, one last soft thing happened. Hope fluttered her wings once and made a tiny, shining spark over Sleepy Capy's blanket. The spark was not a fire or anything loud. It was a small, bright feeling that wrapped itself around Sleepy Capy's heart. It glowed like a tiny lantern and made his dreams gentle and warm. In his dream, Sleepy Capy walked across the sky on a soft, slow cloud. Hope guided him with little bell sounds. Swoop drew circles in the air to make the clouds smooth. Pip told stories about the stars, and Laura watched with a proud and gentle smile. Together, they helped a little star find its way home. Sleepy Capy woke with a yawning smile and a heart full of the day's kindness. The next morning was bright again. The river hummed, the mango tree stretched, and the birds were ready for more small, lovely mischief. Sleepy Capy rubbed his eyes and unfolded his blanket. He looked up, and there was Hope, waiting with a new idea. "Today," Hope said, buzzing with tiny excitement, "we can be sky helpers. We'll fly, or walk, up and down the meadow and help anything that needs a friend." Sleepy Capy blinked, but then nodded. "Yes," he said. "I'll be your slow helper. I have gentle hands." So they started their day with careful steps and quick darting. They listened for things that made soft sounds, a leaf that whispered, a beetle that tapped, a puddle that sighed. Sometimes the help they gave was big in feeling, but small in doing. A kind word, a soft nudge, a song to help a small voice be heard. On the way, they met a young kite tangled in a branch. The kite had been flown by a child who lived beyond the hill, and the wind had turned mischievous and folded the kite into the top of a tree. Hope fluttered about and peered into the branches. Swoop zipped around, his wings making a breeze that loosened a twig. Pip chattered encouragement. Laura reached high and gently unhooked the string with her long beak. Sleepy Capy stood beneath, ready to catch the kite's fallen tail. When the kite came down, the meadow cheered with little songs. The kite owed them a bright, paper yellow ribbon and a promise to fly again. They kept moving. In a patch of sunlight, they found a drowsy butterfly, whose wing had a crinkled corner from a brush with a thorn. The butterfly was trying to rest, but the crinkle made it uncomfortable. Hope sang a careful note while Pip fetched a soft petal. Sleepy Capy moistened his finger with cool river water and placed it with great care, smoothing the petal like a bandage. Laura told the butterfly a slow story that made the butterfly forget its small worry, and soon it fluttered stronger again. All day they found little things to help. A nest that needed a new twig, a small puddle that wanted a reflection of the sky so a tadpole could count clouds, a baby dove that wanted a soft voice to calm its anxious heart. Each time, the friends used what they knew best. Hope's quickness reached high and fast. Swoop's wind helped carry things gently. Pip's questions found the right tool for the job. Laura's long reach moved heavy things with careful steps. Sleepy Capy's steady presence made everyone feel safe. As the sun warmed toward afternoon, a hush came over the meadow. The friends sat in a ring of grass, breathing in the sweet smell of mango. They were tired in the pleasant way of helpers who have used their best selves. They were quieter now, and their voices were soft as if not to wake the sleeping flowers. "Friends make the world softer," said Hope, her voice like a small bell. "And warmer," added Sleepy Capy, smiling and smoothing his blanket. Pip hopped a little closer. "And brighter," she said, "because we find things other people might miss." Swoop nodded, spinning once in a lazy circle. "And fun," he laughed. Laura smiled with the calm of a pond. That night, the friends had a farewell festival. It was not big, just little lights and songs and the soft smell of river lilies. The birds made tiny lanterns from paper and leaves. They sang slow songs that moved like the flow of the river. They shared mangoes and petals and more stories. Sleepy Capy hummed a low hum that matched the river's song. Hope made tiny notes that floated like silver bells. When the moon rose high, Sleepy Capy felt the same small bright glow inside him. He wrapped his blue blanket around his shoulders and looked up at his friends who rested above. Hope hovered close. Swoop tucked his tail. Pip nestled into some warm reeds, and Laura stood like a quiet statue, watching the stars. "Good night, friend," Hope whispered. "Good night," Sleepy Capy mumbled happily, eyes closing. He breathed the river air and felt sure of this. Friendship was a thing that was made of small, gentle pieces, of songs, of helping hands and wings, of quiet listening. It was made of sharing naps and mangoes and stories, and of being there when someone's pebble needed a push. In his dreams that night, Sleepy Capy and his friends travelled across the softest clouds. They helped a tiny moonbeam find a lost silver button and taught a lonely star to sing. They flew slow and fast, laughed, and stretched their wings until they got tired. When Sleepy Capy woke in the morning, his blanket smelled a little like starlight. Days passed like soft pages turned. Sleepy Capy and Hope and their friends had many small adventures. They helped a newly hatched chick find its mother by listening to the pattern of her clucks. They soothed a frightened fox with warm words and a safe path through the meadow. They found a place where a small sapling needed shade and built a tiny leaf umbrella from big leaves. Every time, Sleepy Capy learned more about what friendship meant. He learned that friends could be very different and that differences made the world a kinder place. Hope taught Sleepy Capy how to see the world in dots of quick colour. Sleepy Capy taught Hope how to slow down and taste the sweetness of the mango longer. Swoop taught them how to make wind songs with a giggle. Pip taught them the joy of asking questions. Laura taught them to watch the moon and learn patience. Sometimes, when the sky rained, the birds flew under Sleepy Capy's wide blanket until the rain calmed. Sometimes Sleepy Capy waited under a big leaf while Hope zipped out to get a lost feather. Each time, they met in the middle, where slow and fast, loud and soft, big and small, all folded into something gentle and bright. The meadow kept them company. It changed with the weather and the seasons, yet always held the sweet smell of mango and the hum of the river. The birds came and went. Some left for longer journeys, others returned with new songs and bright feathers. But Sleepy Capy and Hope stayed, day after day, making their small, shining life together. One afternoon, Sleepy Capy sat beneath the mango tree and watched tiny waves of heat shimmer in the distance. Hope zipped across the sky, looking as bright as ever, and then returned with news. "There's a gathering at the old banyan tree," she announced, hovering with glee. "All the flying friends will meet. We can go and bring stories." Sleepy Capy blinked slowly. He loved gatherings because they meant new friends and more gentle help to share. He folded his blanket and rose, stretching his paws. He walked more slowly than the birds, but he walked with a sure heart. Hope flew above his head like a small shining arrow. At the banyan tree, feathers of all colours rustled like a soft tide. Some birds sung in chorus, others shared tiny tidbits of food. Sleepy Capy felt a little shy at first among so many fluttering wings, but when Hope introduced him with a bright little flourish, "This is Sleepy Capy. He's the slowest napper but the best helper." The birds fluttered closer and smiled. Swoop did a small trick, and Pip told a joke that made everyone giggle. They sat in a wide circle, and each friend, bird and beast, shared a story about how someone had helped them. The stories were small and full of heart. A net untangled, a cold night brightened with warm fruit, a lost way found with patient listening. Sleepy Capy listened with his slow, warm attention, and when his turn came he told of small things. How a hummingbird's tiny song felt like a blanket. How a crane's slow steps made a path safe. How birds and river creatures together fixed the moss house of beetles. The others nodded and clapped with their wings. When the gathering ended, they all promised to keep helping, to look for small things that needed friends, and to listen with soft ears. Then they flew and walked back to their homes, some across the sky, some along the river's bank, some into the tall grass. Back in the quiet meadow, Sleepy Capy wrapped his blanket around his shoulders and looked up. Hope landed gently on his paw and gave him one bright, happy peck on the nose. On the outside only, nothing loud. "Thank you for being my friend," Hope said. "And thank you for being mine," Sleepy Capy whispered back, slow and true. They sat together until the stars came out like tiny pieces of silver candy scattered on a dark cloth. The crickets began their soft orchestra, and somewhere a frog counted each note. Sleepy Capy yawned one long, comfortable yawn and closed his eyes. Hope tucked her head under her wing and hummed the smallest, most careful tune. The moon watched over them, a soft silver guardian. That last thought of the moon watching made Sleepy Capy feel as if he had a whole sky of friends looking after him. He slept. And even when the wind changed, when seasons wove new colours into the leaves, and when some birds flew farther than the eye could see, the friendship stayed. It lived in small moments, a shared mango slice, a song sung in the rain, a pebble nudged back into place, a tiny lantern of care held up on a dark path. Over and over, Sleepy Capy and Hope and their airborne friends taught one another. Friends help, friends listen, friends share, and friends stay, even when they are far apart. That is how life flowed in the meadow beside the slow river, with naps and songs, with quick wings and patient paws, and with 100 small kindnesses that made a home where everyone belonged. Sleepy Capy and Hope, Friends of the Meadow. Part 2. When the sun eased up over the soft green meadow, it painted new gold on the river and made the mango tree seem to smile. Sleepy Capy opened his eyes and stretched slowly, the way a long warm blanket stretches across a bed. His blue blanket lay folded beside him like a small, faithful friend. Hope was already awake, hovering above with tiny wings a blur of excitement. "Good morning," Hope chimed, bright as a bell. "Today feels like an exploring day." Sleepy Capy blinked and smiled his slow, gentle smile. "Let's go," he said. His voice felt like the first sip of warm tea. Soon the meadow filled with the soft rustle of wings. Swoop zipped high and low, drawing wide circles in the air. Pip fluttered happily from fence post to fence post, asking questions to anything that listened. Laura walked with quiet dignity along the riverbank, her long legs making soft prints in the mud. A few new friends had come too. A small twilight-coloured bat named Miri, who liked to find hidden glowworms, and a cheerful kingfisher named Kiko, with feathers like a bright blue ribbon. "Where shall we explore?" asked Kiko, chattering like a tiny bell. Hope hovered, thinking quickly. "Let's follow the ripple trail," she said. "It's a line where the river whispers to the meadow. It goes past the marsh and to the willow bend. I heard a sound there last night, like someone singing a song that didn't belong to frogs or birds." "A mystery song?" Pip peeped, eyes wide. "Let's solve it." And so they went, Sleepy Capy leading with steady steps, and the birds and river friends making a small chorus above and beside him. The ripple trail was a place where soft waves kissed the grass and left tiny beads of light. They walked slowly, so they would not scare anything that might be hiding. Along the path, a dragonfly named Tess flitted by, her wings painted with tiny silver marks. "You're following the whisper path," she buzzed. "There's a place ahead where the reeds make little rooms." be gentle. Some rooms are home to shy things. We will be gentle, Hope answered with a twinkle. When they reached the willow bend, the willow tree bent low over the water, like a grandmother leaning down to listen. The branches touched the river and made small ripples, and the air smelled like damp earth and soft leaves. From inside the willow's sweeping curtain came a sound that was not exactly singing and not exactly a breeze, a tinkling like someone clapping very tiny shells together. They neared carefully. From behind a curtain of leaves peeped a tiny creature they had never seen before. It was as small as a pebble, but stood on 2 legs. It wore a coat made from a dry leaf, and had eyes like 2 bright seeds. Its hands held a string of tiny shiny shells that jingled when it moved. When it saw the friends, it froze and shivered a little. The creature squeaked a quiet hello. "I'm Nook," it said in a voice that sounded like wind through straw. "I am a keeper of small things. I live where the willow makes a hush. I make music for lost feelings." Hope's wings fluttered. "Lost feelings?" Nook nodded. "Sometimes feelings fall from pockets, like tiny pebbles. They get lost in the reeds and get lonely. I gather them and make little songs so they won't be sad." Sleepy Capy felt his heart tilt like a small boat. "Can we hear your song?" he asked, voice warm as moss. Nook smiled. He shook his shell string. The sound was shy and sweet, like raindrops peeking between leaves. Each tiny jingle felt like a small hug for a forgotten feeling. The friends listened, and slowly the willow's hush warmed into something that felt like remembering a kind thing. "We should help Nook find the lost feelings," suggested Hope. "Sometimes friends feel dropped or cloudy. We can help them feel found." So they did. They split up in soft, careful teams. Tess and Kiko skimmed above the reeds to look for bright pieces of colour. Pip and Miri used their keen eyes to peer into tiny holes. Laura walked the bank and looked under root steps where little feelings might hide. Sleepy Capy used his gentle nose to nudge aside damp leaves, and Hope zipped everywhere, humming a cheerful tune that gave courage to small things. They found many small things: a lost laugh that had slipped behind a stone, a brave squeak stuck in a hollow, a shy wonder curled around a reed. Each thing looked different. Some glittered like dust, some were warm, like a tiny ember, and some were soft like fur. Nook gathered them carefully and tucked each one into a small pocket made from willow silk. For each feeling found, he made a new note on his shell string. When the last tiny thing was found, a small, sticky time feeling that smelled like spilled honey, the friends all sighed in a happy, tired way. The willow swayed like it, too, had been comforted. "Thank you," Nook whispered, his eyes shining like wet seeds. "The lost feelings can be lonely. You made them come home." "We all help in different ways," Sleepy Capy replied. "And that is how being friends is." They left the willow bend with pockets a little fuller and hearts softer. As they walked back, Miri pointed out tiny glowworm homes tucked under moss. Tess darted greetings to a perched beetle who juggled seeds on its head. Kiko splashed a cool spray from the river that made everyone laugh. At the mango tree, they rested and shared mild fruit. Pip told a funny story about a cloud that tried to disguise itself as a sheep. Swoop practiced a new fly trick that looked like drawing a long musical comma in the sky. Hope buzzed with small ideas for the next day. "Tomorrow," she said, we could make a kindness map. We'll mark where we found lost things and where people might need help. Then anyone who wants to help can look and find a place to begin." Sleepy Capy nodded. A kindness map sounded like a warm paper for the world. "Let's draw it," he said. They spent the next morning making the kindness map. Pip collected soft clay and made little markers shaped like seeds. Laura traced the river with a long stick in the mud to show the trail. Hope and Swoop drew little arrows across the sky where breezes like to travel. Kiko painted bright dots where the river splashed and glimmered. Sleepy Capy pressed his paw in the mud and made a round mark. Home. After they finished, they pinned the kindness map to the big mango tree for anyone who wanted to read it. The map was simple. A picture of the meadow, drawings of the willow, the marsh, the knoll where the children flew kites, and notes in small, careful hands saying, "Help here, sing here, share fruit here." Tiny visitors, ants, mice, and birds came to look and nodded at the places they knew. Days grew like a small stack of happy papers. The friends used the map to find places that needed them. They helped a snail who had wandered into a place where the sun was too hot and moved it to a cool log. They found a little mole who wanted a friend to show him the surface and let him smell the sun. They taught the mole how to look at the sky, how colours change like whispers, and the mole showed them how to feel the comfort in the shelter of the earth. One morning, a tricky wind came that made the world feel muddled. It blew in from the hill in bursts and made hats fly, papers spin, and little songs get lost. The friends' kindness map suddenly had lots of dots blinking like alarms. "We must help," Hope said, urgency twinkling through her feathers. They hurried to the places where the wind was busiest. At the children's play hill, a kite had wrapped itself around a young sapling. The children were sad that their kite had trapped the little tree's branches. Hope zipped up and unknotted a tail, while Swoop used a soft gust to loosen the kite's string, and Kiko used his beak to hold the sapling steady. Sleepy Capy stood by, making a small wall of calm with his body so the children could take the kite gently. At the bakery by the path, where a friendly crow named Cory liked to nap on warm stones, the wind had blown sugar crumbs all over the place. The bakery was a jumble of sweet things, and a small dog named Tilly was sniffing and getting too excited. Pip organised a crumb sweep, while Sleepy Capy used his blanket like a scoop to gather the larger bits. Cory cackled a little and helped by pointing with her beak where the crumbs wanted to be. In a short while, the bakery was tidy again, and Tilly had a loud treat. Even the wind had feelings, the friends decided. Maybe it was tired and wanting to race. So they played a gentle game with it. Swoop flew circles to balance the gusts. Hope sang tiny bell notes that made the wind swirl kinder, and Laura leaned into the breeze to guide it along. The wind, feeling noticed, slowed down and diffused into soft breezes that smelled like mango again. After all that activity, they were tired in the best way, softly tired. At the river, they found a quiet spot and shared a slow meal. Sleepy Capy closed his eyes a little and let his breath match the slow pulse of the water. The birds told small stories of the wind's tricks and how a kite learned to be careful around baby saplings. As twilight came, a different rhythm swept over the meadow. The lamplight of fireflies began to blink, and the moon cut a gentle path across the sky. A new friend arrived at their resting spot, a little pale owl named Ori, with round gold eyes that looked like polished coins. He had been travelling, and had many quiet things to say. "Good evening," Ori hooted softly. "I saw your kindness map and followed the little, gentle footprints. You have been busy." "We're still learning," Hope replied, hovering shyly. Ori nodded. "Learning never ends. May I tell you a story?" His voice was a round, slow bell. The friends nodded and made room on the blanket. Ori told them of a far meadow where the stars leaned low enough to taste the grass, and where animals learned to hold feathers like promises of courage. His story made the moon seem even rounder. When Ori finished, the friends felt the day settle. Sleepy Capy yawned and wrapped his blanket more tightly. Hope fluttered close and whispered, "Friends are like small lamps. We give a little light, so others can see." Sleepy Capy agreed, and in the hush that followed, everyone felt content, calm like water after a rain. The next week brought a festival that was gentle and bright, the Sky Feather Festival. It was a tradition where flying friends celebrated the colours and gifts of wind and wing. Birds from near and far came. Some were bright and loud, some quiet and embroidered with tiny songs. They pinned little feathers to the branches of an old fig tree and told stories of where feathers came from, the places they'd flown, and the helpers they'd found along the way. Sleepy Capy and Hope had a special idea for the festival. They decided to make a friend feather tree where everyone could hang notes of thanks and small tokens for one another. Sleepy Capy found a wide, low branch and tied strings of grass into loops. Pip wrote tiny notes and tucked them into hollowed seeds. Kiko gathered blue pebbles and painted them with dots of river light. Miri found small glowworm cases and gave them as tiny lamps for bedtime. The birds, bats, and even a polite squirrel named Sable added their pieces. When the festival began, the fig tree glimmered with colour and gentle promises. The friends danced, some in the sky with wide loops and others in small steps on the ground. They sang songs that matched the names of the winds: Sigh, Whisper, Happy Burst. Sleepy Capy hummed the slowest line. It made the wind feel like a warm scarf. At the end of the festival, everyone circled the friend feather tree. They read notes aloud, each one a small beam of thanks. A little mouse thanked Kiko for showing her a cool puddle. A young swallow thanked Hope for steadying her when she was learning to land. Pip read a note Sleepy Capy had written in tiny, careful paw prints. "To all my friends, thank you for choosing me." Everyone smiled, and the fig tree seemed to tuck them in like a wise old friend tuck a blanket around Sleepy's shoulders. Winter came softly, not harsh but gentle, with earlier nights and slower days. The meadow's colours dimmed a little, but the friendships warmed like a lit lantern. The friends adjusted. They sang warmer songs and shared more thick fruit and seeds. Hope learned to make tiny fluff nests from dandelion down to sit upon when the wind was cold. Swoop learned to fold his wings closer so his feathers didn't rattle with each gust. Sleepy Capy learned to nap with his nose tucked and the blanket over his shoulders like a cozy hat. One late afternoon, when the sky was a glassy pink, a small shadow crossed the meadow. A travelling falcon named Farah, who flew steadily and looked wise and a little worried. She came with news tucked into her feathers. "There is a storm coming past the far hill," Farah said in a voice like brisk air. "It's a traveller storm, not mean, but confused. It may leave parts of the meadow upside down, The friends looked at one another. The kindness map had been a guide for small things. Now they needed a plan for something bigger. Sleepy Capy pressed his paw to the ground and felt the steady pulse of the earth. "We will be ready," he said with calm that made the others quiet and brave. They prepared gently. They tied down things that could fly, tucked fragile nests deeper under leaves, and asked help from the tall trees to hold on to their branches. Kiko and Swoop made a guard of wind with their flying patterns to help steady leaves and small loose things. Laura and Tess moved fragile nests to safer branches and dug small trenches to guide heavy puddles away from tiny homes. Hope and Pip checked every small den and nest for things that might be missed. Sleepy Capy patrolled the lower paths, guiding little travellers, ants, beetles, and small field mice into safe hollows. When the storm arrived, it blew with great curiosity. Twists like a wild braid through the meadow. The friends did not fight it, but greeted it like someone clumsy who needed directions. They helped the storm move gently along by offering soft songs and placing large leaves as signs so the storm would not trip on small things. The storm, warmed by their care, changed its path a little and let the meadow keep its small houses intact. After the storm, when the air smelled clean like new pages, the friends counted the small wins. Nests still homey, pathways still safe, and the friend feather tree only a little ruffled. They gathered to share warm fruit and quiet thanks. A soft, tired cheer rose from their circle, the kind that sounds like a comfy blanket settling. Over and over, seasons wound like threads through the meadow. The kindness map grew with new marks and tiny stories tucked along the edges. New faces came, some shy, some bright, and the old friends greeted each of them with small lamps of care. Sleepy Capy learned that sometimes friends must be helpers in big and small ways, and sometimes friends need to be seen and held like precious things. One bright afternoon, as the meadow shivered in the heat of high summer, Hope zipped down to Sleepy Capy with a tiny paper folded in two. It had been carried by a child who visited the river long ago. The child had written a small note and tied it to a stone. "Read it," Hope chirped. Sleepy Capy unfolded the paper with careful pause. The words were clumsy and sincere. "Thank you for the kite. You saved my kite and my smile. A friend." Sleepy Capy's slow smile widened into a warm glow. He kept the paper in his blanket pocket like a treasure. It felt like someone had tied a ribbon around his heart. That night, under a bowl of stars, the friends gathered by the river. They sat in a soft ring of hush and light and shared small silences, those quiet spaces between songs that say more than words. Pip told a short story about a little cloud that learned to keep promises. Kiko counted soft splashes in rhythm. Miri and Tess found tiny ways to draw glow shapes in the air. Laura hummed the old pond song. Hope flitted close to Sleepy Capy and whispered, "We have made a home, and we will keep it," Sleepy Capy replied, feeling the truth like a small heat in the middle of his chest. Their friendship was not a loud thing. It lived in the small ways they noticed one another, and in the little lamps they lent when someone's path dimmed. It grew like a vine, slow, patient, and steady, and it made the meadow into a place where anyone might begin again. Sleepy Capy and Hope, friends of the meadow. Part 3. When morning came, the meadow woke like a slow song. The river blinked silver, the mango tree stretched its leaves, and Sleepy Capy unfolded his blue blanket, with the comfortable care of someone who knows many naps are still possible. Hope hovered above him, bright as a bell and full of ideas. Today feels like a learning day, she said, her wings a quick whisper. Let's visit the cloud garden. Sleepy Capy blinked slowly. The cloud garden? He repeated. He had heard stories, soft, small stories told by travelling birds, about a place where clouds grew like flowers and where wind taught little lessons. The idea made his whiskers twitch with curiosity. So they set off, a gentle parade of wings and paws. Swoop drew wide loops in the sky. Pip hopped messages between tall grasses. Laura walked with the slow dignity of one who watches tides. Kiko darted over the river, leaving bright ripples. Miri and Tess zipped about like dusk and mist. Even Ori came down from his tall perch to join them, his golden eyes round and steady. The path to the cloud garden wound up a low hill and across a field of tall, soft grass that whispered secrets when you walked through. At the top of the hill, the air felt thinner and cooler, and the sky seemed very close. Tiny puffs of cloud sat low like sheep and moved in slow circles. The cloud garden was farther up, where clouds gathered to be tended by wind and sky. A small, laughing breeze greeted them and led them to a soft place where clouds rested on cushions of air. At first, the friends were careful. Sleepy Capy hardly liked to climb high, but he stepped up on a soft hummock of cloud that felt like a pillow of cool steam. Hope zipped up and made tiny patterns in the mist with her wings. Swoop dove and came up with a ribbon of cloud that stuck to his tail, which made everyone giggle. "Welcome," said a voice that sounded like a bell under water. From behind a silver curl of cloud stepped a small, feathered being they had not known before. She had wings edged in mist and eyes like raindrop glass. Her name was Nimbus, and she was a gardener of clouds. Nimbus smiled and showed them around. The cloud garden was a place where clouds were tended and taught to be kind. Some clouds learned to carry soft, cool shade across a meadow. Others practiced holding a light rain to help seeds sleep until spring. Nimbus explained how every cloud had a small job and a small lesson to learn, and how the wind sometimes needed help knowing where to go. "We don't always make big things," Nimbus said. "We practice small goodness. A cloud that can hold a little rain without scaring a baby beetle is a cloud that grows brave." Hope's wings hummed with delight. "Can we help?" she asked. "Yes," Nimbus replied, and she showed them a row of tiny clouds who were learning how to make sound, soft rain. They needed practice, so their droplets fell like little taps instead of heavy drums. The friends gathered to help the clouds practice. Swoop flew fast circles beneath a young rain cloud, making a soft breeze that showed the droplets how to fall slowly. Pip sang a little rhyme that made the cloud feel safe and able to try again. Laura stretched wide and caught the faint sounds of pattern in the sky to teach them rhythm. Sleepy Capy sat very still on a cushion of cloud and hummed a low, steady melody that felt like a pillow being fluffed. Hope darted through, ringing small bell notes that helped the clouds find joy in their work. The young clouds tried and tried. At first, their rain plopped a little hard, startling a sleepy cricket. The friends giggled and helped the cricket move to a sheltered leaf. Slowly, the clouds learned to let their drops go gentle and hush-like. Nimbus beamed with pride. "You all have kind hands," she said. "You teach gently." That is a good way to help the sky. They left the cloud garden feeling light and a bit mist-scented. On the way back down the hill, they met a flock of small, bright-winged swifts who were passing through on a long journey. The swifts were tired. Their wings had flapped for many sunrises, and they looked ready to rest. Sleepy Capy offered his blanket, and the swifts tucked under it in a neat, tiny pile. Hope sang them a lullaby as they rested. "Travellers need places to hold them," Hope said when the swifts awoke, bright-eyed and thankful. "We can be that place." Back in the meadow, the friends found a new puzzle waiting. Small stone markers had appeared overnight along a hidden path near the reeds. Each stone had a tiny picture carved into it: a leaf, a moon, a basket, a feather. They had been left there by someone who once walked the meadow long ago. "Maybe they are a riddle," Pip chirped, pecking at a stone. "We can learn from riddles," Laura said with a soft smile. "They ask us to look slowly." They followed the stones. The pictures seemed to suggest small acts. Leave a leaf for a wandering beetle. Sing to the moon for an anxious frog. Share a basket of food with a tired traveller. As they walked, the stones guided them to small places that needed attention. Each time they did a tiny task, another stone glowed faintly, as if saying thank you. At the last stone, they found a small book wrapped in a leaf. Inside were short notes from many hands, simple promises. "I will look after one small thing today. I will share a seed. I will teach a song." The notes were old and soft, but their words still smelled like kind afternoons. "It's a promise book," Sleepy Capy said, reading slowly. People and animals wrote to remember to help. They decided to add their own promises. Hope wrote a tiny feather stamp by dipping her wing gently in berry juice and pressing it on the page. Swoop drew a windy swirl. Pip folded a small paper flower to tuck inside. Sleepy Capy wrote in careful paw prints, "I will be a steady place to nap and a steady place to help." They hid the book back under the leaf for whoever might find it next. When night arrived, the friends gathered for a simple game called Echo Lights. One friend would whisper a small kind thing they had done, and the others would echo it back with a word of thanks. And then they would light a tiny firefly lamp to remember it, the meadow filled with slow, glowing dots as they remembered good deeds, sharing fruit, helping a nest, learning a new song. Each glow seemed to make the air hum gentler. A little later, they heard a faint, long sound, a bell-like ringing that did not come from any bird. The sound came from the old well on the hill, a round place with stones that had been rolled smooth by many hands. The friends decided to investigate. At the well, they found a small, old frog named Pharaoh who cared for the well. Pharaoh's webbed fingers trembled as he showed them a rope he used to draw water. The rope was frayed, and Pharaoh worried it might break when he pulled water for thirsty travellers. "We can fix it," Sleepy Capy said, feeling his chest warm with the steady certainty he often felt when friends needed him. They gathered materials: strong vine from the fig tree, soft moss to make padding so the new rope would not scrape the stones, and a long braided stem that would act as a new handle. Laura and Tess braided carefully with long patient fingers and nimble wings, and Hope threaded bright, small knots into the rope for decoration. Pip tied a little ribbon that said, "For Pharaoh," and Swoop used his gust to help dry the new rope. When it was done, Pharaoh pulled the bucket up with a steady smile. He tasted the water and croaked a grateful song that rippled up the hill. The friends felt proud in a quiet way. They had stitched together a small thing, a rope, that would help many later. Winter turned towards spring, and the meadow heard the first small pops of new green leaves. Sleepy Capy and his friends celebrated by planting a tiny garden near the river, with seeds that were given to them by a travelling hedgehog. They planted seeds of soft marigolds and tiny carrots and some herbs that smelled like sleepy tea. Sleepy Capy's paw prints pressed the soil, and Hope hummed as she scattered the seeds in bright, playful loops. They watered the seeds with careful drips and made little fences from twigs to keep curious noses from digging them up. They promised to watch over the garden. Pip promised to tell the seeds funny stories to make them sprout with happy faces. Swoop promised to make playful breezes that would teach the leaves to dance. Laura promised to keep the ground soft and the sun paths clear. Sleepy Capy promised to nap next to the garden so the young plants would feel safe and steady. One morning, a small, important visitor arrived, an old stork named Petra, who had long legs and eyes like polished wood. She carried with her a paper wrapped around a bundle, and she moved with the quiet speed of someone who had seen many springs. "I have come," Petra said, "to pass down a small ritual. In my home, we celebrate the first sprout. When the first green peeks out of the ground, we sing a small song and promise to care." The friends leaned in. They had already learned small promises, but this felt like a proper, gentle vow to keep. They watched and waited. The days were a mix of naps, small tasks, and bird lessons. Sleepy Capy kept watch from his blanket, while the birds danced overhead and the river hummed under the sun. One morning, a teeny green head popped up from the soil, so small it could fit on the tip of a beak. Pip squealed softly with happy delight. The friends circled and whispered kind wishes. Petra sang the first sprout song, a tune like water over pebbles, and they all promised to care for the garden. Season spun, and the garden grew like a careful chorus. Little carrots popped up orange smiles, marigolds opened sleepy faces, and herbs made a bed of scent that smelled like slow dinners and warm baths. When the garden needed tending, the friends were there, pulling tiny weeds, shading young shoots with broad leaves, teaching beetles which leaves were fine for munching and which were not. One day, a problem arrived that was not scared of smallness. A hedgehog named Bristle, who lived near the hill, came in a tumble, looking worried. "My entrance to my burrow has been blocked," he panted. "The recently fallen branch from the old oak is too heavy for me to move." They hurried to the oak and found a branch that slumped across Bristle's doorway, a whole little gate made of weathered wood. Sleepy Capy tried to push, but the branch was heavy. Swoop and Kiko tried to tug, but they could not hold steady. Laura suggested a plan. "We will make a seesaw," Laura said. "We will use a strong log and a pivot to lift the branch. It will take thinking and steady hands." They found a long straight stick to use as a lever and a stout rock for the pivot. Sleepy Capy used his weight to anchor one end, while Laura and Swoop pushed from the other. Hope and Pip held small ropes to keep things balanced. With a soft heave and many patient breaths, the branch tipped and rolled away enough for Bristle to wiggle back into his burrow. Bristle sniffed the air and snuffled a happy song. He offered the friends a small prize from his hoard. a shiny acorn cap that glinted like a tiny crown. Sleepy Capy accepted it with a gentle bow and put it next to his blanket as a new treasure. That night, sitting around in a circle warmed by the glow of firefly lights, they felt the easy satisfaction of a day spent helping. Sleepy Capy closed his eyes and thought back over the day, the cloud garden, the promise book, the rope for Pharaoh, the first sprout song, and the seesaw that opened Bristle's doorway. Each thing was a little thread in the big, warm tapestry of their friendship. But friendships also teach hard things. One late afternoon, when the sun hung low like an orange coin, Hope came fluttering with a worried beak. "There's a young gull near the river," she said. "She tried to join the flock, but her wing is sore, and she can't fly well." They hurried to the riverbank and found the gull, a pale bird with a small, crooked wing. Her name was Jilly, and her chest heaved with worry. "I wanted to fly with my cousins," Jilly said in a small, trembling voice. "But when I tried, my wing hurt. I feel left behind." Hope perched on Gilly's shoulder and sang a tiny tune. "You're not left behind," she said. "We can help you learn another way to move and be part of the flock." They thought and planned. Laura suggested teaching Jilly small, safe flights over short distances. Swoop offered to fly slowly beside her, giving steady gusts of wind for support. Tess promised to show her how to catch air in small smiles like a ripple. Sleepy Capy promised to be there on the ground so Jilly would know someone steady waited. They practiced day after day. At first, Jilly's wing flapped and then crumpled in worry. She would wobble and land with a soft thump. Each time, the friends cheered for small progress. One extra beat, a steadier glide, a happier landing. Slowly, Jilly grew brave. She learned to ride short winds and to trust the lift from a careful swoop. The flock watched with gentle clucks and returned to their migrations with stories of a brave little gull who learned her own pace. Jilly never became the fastest glider in the sky, but she found joy in slow, small adventures, low flights over the reeds, and safe rides on slow currents. She discovered she could sing a special song no other gull could sing, a flutter that sounded like a soft bell and made tiny fish jump with surprise. The flock loved her for it. This taught Sleepy Capy and his friends a lesson. Helping a friend was not always about fixing a thing at once. Often it was about staying patient and making a space to try again and again. It was about clapping for small wins. As summer folded into a softer, more honeyed light, the friends continued their small missions. They made new maps, picked up more stones for the promise book, and taught small lessons in patience and kindness. The friend feather tree grew more stories, and the cloud garden sent little mists like thank you notes. One evening, as they sat on the hill watching the moon rise, Hope fluttered to Sleepy Capy and placed a tiny, warm pebble in his paw. It was a smooth stone, painted by a child's small hand, with a dot of blue that looked like the river. "For being steady," Hope said. Sleepy Capy held the pebble and felt his chest fill like a small bell being rung. He loved the pebble, not because it was painted, but because of the meaning tucked inside it, the way a friend had noticed his steady heart. They spent the night telling stories and keeping watch. Sleepy Capy hummed low. Hope made stars of her own by clicking her beak softly. The air tasted of mango and promise. When morning came again, the meadow felt ready for another small page. Sleepy Capy folded his blanket and stretched with the infinite patience of someone who had learned to enjoy every slow breath. Hope zipped above, planning new lessons, new kindnesses. Sometimes, Sleepy Capy thought as he watched his friends, the simplest things are the bravest. A small song can heal a lost feeling. A steady paw can open a door. A promise can be a map for many. And friends. Friends are the hands that hold each small piece until it becomes whole. Sleepy Capy and Hope, Friends of the Meadow. Part 4. The morning woke quiet and bright. Sleepy Capy stretched until his paws felt like soft pillows and yawned a sound that made the mango tree shake a little fruit. Hope was already darting about, a tiny bell of motion and light. Today feels like a listening day, she chimed. I heard the moon hum last night, and I think she lost some songs. Sleepy Capy blinked slowly, pleased by the thought of finding songs. Let's listen then, he said, folding his blanket just so, and stepping out with the gentle steadiness he always had. Their friends came quickly when they heard swoop, cutting smooth arcs in the sky, Pip hopping along the fence with a curious tilt, Laura moving like a slow, long shadow near the reeds, Kiko perching on a low rock, Tess humming as she flashed past, Miri blinking in the dim, and Ori gliding down from a branch. Even little Brim the beetle popped out to offer his tiny chuckle. They began at the river, because rivers remember what the sky forgets. The water whispered secrets and carried small sounds along its back. Pebble clinks, far-off frog hums, the soft rush of reedy wings. Sleepy Capy sat on the bank and listened, his ears and heart open like a bowl. Sometimes songs slip from the moon when she yawns, said Ori in a soft voice. They wander down like silver dust and hide. Hope hovered, eyes bright. We will find them and give them back, or give the moon new ones. They walked a gentle line, following tiny echoes. The first thing they found was a small, flattened tune tucked under a leaf, a jaunty little chirp that had lost its point and was muddled like a hat with too many feathers. Pip picked it up, nudged it with her beak, and sang it a clearer note. The chirp straightened, found its beat, and hopped back into the air like a bird with a new step. Further on, in a patch of moss, they discovered a sleepy lullaby that had been stepped over by mice. Tess scooped it up and made it flutter with dragonfly patience until it glowed warm and soft again. Miri wrapped a glowworm's faint shine around the lullaby so it could travel safely back to the moon. But the deeper they went, the quieter the meadow grew. Near the willow where the reeds made secret rooms, they heard a sound like a bell very far away, and faintly cracked, a sorrow song, thin as a thread. It shivered in a hollow, wrapped around a twig. Sleepy Capy crouched, very still, and hummed a low, steady note that brushed the sorrow song gently. Hope danced in tiny circles, ringing hopeful tones. Together, their notes made a small net of comfort, and the sorrow song loosened and rose, offered back to the lantern-dark sky. You're all so good at this, said Nook, the keeper of small things, who had come with a handful of soft seeds. He had been collecting small lost feelings again, and now offered a warm smile. You find what has slipped, and remember how to make it right. They walked on, pockets filling with little bright sounds, whispers, tiny laughter, a hesitant promise, and then a new problem met them. a threadbare song that belonged to the big migrating flocks. It lay heavy and drooping on a stone, its rhythm broken. The thread pulled toward the north. Without its tune, the flock might not find the long road home. "We must not let a flock lose its way," Laura said, her voice a calm ribbon. They planned gently. Swoop volunteered to take the repaired song high to the sky where the flocks flew. Hope and Pip worked to retie its rhythm, tapping out a steady beat on a hollow reed, while Tess shaded it with quick, cool drafts. Sleepy Capy kept their task steady. His paw pressed the song in place when it wobbled, his slow hum steadying the beat, like the soft thunk of a drum in a lullaby. Ori watched the horizon, warm and careful-eyed, searching for the shape of wings. The work was slow. The song had many broken places, and each mending needed care. A stitch of giggle for a missed joy, a hush for a tired wing, a bright note for courage. Sometimes they had to stop and listen, and the silence itself taught them how the song wanted to be fixed. When at last the tune sat whole in their hands, Swoop took it. He flew up in playful loops, letting the song unfurl behind him like a streamer, and the sky shook with it. Far away, the flocks answered with a soft chorus. A line of wings honked a thank you that drifted back like warm bread smell. With the big song set, the friends thought the day's work might be done. But near the knoll by the path, a little shape sat alone, someone they did not know. It was a swallow, but small and shivering. Her wing held a crooked sleep, and her eyes were rimmed with salt from too long trying. "I'm Marn," she said in a tiny voice. "I tried to fly with my cousins, but I lost my tune. I can't remember when to join them." Hope's beak dipped with sympathy. "We'll help you remember," she promised. Marn's wing hurt more than it should have, so she could not practice full flights. The friends gathered around and made a plan of small, patient steps. First, they gave Marn a steady place. Sleepy Capy stretched his blanket in a shady hollow and let her rest, tucking her feather gently against his warm fur. Pip told her small, silly cloud jokes that loosened her throat. Tess made soft whirlpools of air beneath her wings that didn't ask for much, but let her feel a lift. Swoop flew beside her at chest-high levels to show the feel of wind that helps, not tips. Laura walked the ground and taught Marn eye steps, how to place her gaze so the horizon could help her balance. Kiko skimmed the river and splashed little, encouraging drips like applause. Days passed in small practice. Marn tried and fell sometimes. She felt ashamed and heavy with trying, but the friends kept singing her little wins, a tiny glide, a smoother landing, a brave half-beat of her wing. Sleepy Capy would pat the earth where she landed, a soft thank you to the ground for holding her. Hope would lift a laugh like a feather and tuck it into Marn's corner of the blanket. Ori would bring quiet stories of owls who learn to see in the dark, where mistakes are softer. One dusk, after a gentle, slow lesson, Marn sat on the edge of the knoll and watched the setting sun paint the world with a wide orange whisper. Hope hopped onto her shoulder and whispered, "Sing with your heart. The sky remembers how to listen." Marn breathed in, let her wing rest, and sang a thin note that trembled and wavered like a new leaf. The sound was small and honest. It did not need to be perfect. It simply needed to be hers. Something gentle shifted in the air. The note found a partner in the cricket's chorus, and a second in Swoop's far call. The note grew safer. Marn tried again, and this time the wing beat found a small rhythm. She rose a little, not far, but high enough to taste the wind's kindness. She landed with a soft laugh, and the friends clapped in their small ways. Wings fluttering, paws patting the ground, a cheer like a ripple. Later, on a morning washed in milk blue, the swallows passed, their long V carved into the sky like a soft arrow. Marn flew with them, not in long stretches yet, but in measured, certain pieces. She learned her place, not by racing the flock, but by letting the flock meet her pace. The swallows welcomed her with small whistles. As they left, one of the older swifts dropped a bright feather over the knoll as thanks, and it landed right in Sleepy Capy's open paw, like a promise. The meadow felt full that afternoon, full of stitched songs and mended wings, of promises kept and gentle bravery. Sleepy Capy sat on his blanket and felt the pebble in his pocket, a stone painted by a child, and it seemed to shine a little more. Hope buzzed and made up tiny tunes. The friends shared a picnic, modest and sweet, mango slices, a sprinkle of seeds, and tiny cups of nectar. As the sun lowered, the meadow settled into that slow, honeyed hush that feels like being tucked into bed. The fireflies blinked awake, and the friend feather tree rustled with stories. They lit a circle of small glowworm lamps and played a gentle game. Each friend said one small thing they had learned that day. Swoop said he had learned how a slow lift can be kinder than a fast one. Pip said she had learned that jokes can be a bridge when songs are lost. Laura said patience teaches better than hurry. Hope said the same thing she always did, that brave tiny steps are as grand as long flights. Sleepy Capy, in his careful, slow way, said simply, "Friends, make the sky home." They all hummed and let that thought sit like a warm blanket. Before they went to sleep, Nook shuffled in with his shell string, adding a soft jingle to their circle. He tucked each of the day's found songs into a pocket of willow silk and hung them on a low branch like tiny lanterns. "So, the songs won't wander far again," he said. "And if the moon forgets, she can borrow one from our branch." Sleepy Capy watched the light sway and felt small, steady joy fill him. The pebble in his pocket warmed like a pebble that had been in a child's hand too long. He lay back and felt the soft thrum of the river like a lullaby under his skin. Hope tucked herself into the crook of his blanket and chirped one last tiny tune, a bell-soft note that drifted into his dream. That night the moon hummed, but the hum was whole. The songs had been found and mended, and the meadow kept them safe in pockets and branches and warm, slow paws. In the morning, the friends would rise again, ready for small tasks and simple courage, for they had learned how much one gentle band of friends could do. How many tiny things could be made right when hearts listened, hands and wings helped, and no one hurried the healing. Sleepy Capy and Hope, Friends of the Meadow. Part 5. Morning came soft and bright over the meadow. The river slid like a long, sleepy ribbon, and the mango tree dripped small drops of dew that smelled like sweet mornings. Sleepy Capy uncurled from his blanket with a slow stretch and the small ritual of checking his pockets for treasures. A painted pebble, the feather the swallows had left, a tiny ribbon from bristle. Hope was already hovering, a little bell of motion and light. "Today feels like a sharing day," she chimed. "I found a pile of lost things by the hill last night. They look like little pieces of other days. Maybe we could return them. Sleepy Capy blinked his big, soft eyes. He liked returning things. He liked how returning meant joining pieces and making a person whole again. He folded his blanket neatly, tucked the pebble into a pocket, and stood up with careful pause. Their friends gathered soon. Swoop, making wide arcs, Pip chittering questions, Laura gliding in, Kiko bobbing near the river, Miri blinking glowworm light, Tess painting tiny silver marks through the air, Ori quiet and round-eyed. Even Nook came with his shell string jingling, and Brim the beetle clicked a small hello. Hope led them to the hill. Tucked behind a tuft of grass, they found a small bundle. Ribbons frayed like soft rainbows, a little wooden toy car with a wheel loose, a mitten with a button missing, a paper with a half-drawn map, and one small shoe no bigger than a pebble. Someone had gathered these pieces and left them wrapped in a clean leaf, as if waiting for hands that would care. "Let's figure who they belong to," Pip said, or pecking the map. Her head cocked and she read the wobbly lines with delight. "This looks like the road near the bakery, and see, the bakery always leaves crumbs by the fence." They walked gently, following small clues. Sleepy Capy smelled the trail of sugar in the air and found the bakery's corner where tiny giggles sometimes hid. The little shoe, no bigger than a pebble, was recognized by a mouse mother who came out shy and sniffed. It belonged to her young one who liked to dance on warm stones. The mitten was returned to a field mouse who had lost it while playing with leaf boats on the puddles. The painted ribbon was for a child who visited the river sometimes and had tied a ribbon in the mango tree. Pip remembered seeing it flutter like a small promise. When they returned the things, each recipient's eyes widened and softened. A lost laugh came back with the shoe. The mouse tucked the mitten carefully by her sleep hole like a treasure. The child, who had been searching the day before, found the ribbon tied again and made a small happy dance that made the birds laugh. Sleepy Capy felt a warm glow that was neither sun nor mango, but close to both, like the cozy, satisfied feeling of knitting together small cares. "We are like a gentle path," Hope said, circling and leaving tiny bell notes in the air. They spent the morning delivering small things and listening to stories that travelled with them. Each returned piece had a short tale. The wooden toy car had once been a child's fastest racer until it crashed into a puddle and someone carried it home. The paper map had been half drawn by a small traveller who loved drawing curvy paths. The ribbon had been cut loose by a gust and wished to be tied again. After the returns, the friends decided to hold a sharing circle under the mango tree. Everyone brought something small to share, not only things, but songs, stories, and skills. Pip brought a story about a cloud that forgot its name and learned it again through a game of questions. Swoop brought a wind trick that made leaves dance like confetti. Kiko offered bright river splashes that smelled like clean stones. Tess showed a tiny spell of silver shimmer that helped hide shy things until they were ready. Miri brought a soft glowworm lamp to share, for nights when travellers felt small and needed a guide. Sleepy Capy laid his blanket like a small island and brought his low hum, the kind of sound that makes leaves settle. He shared a slow song that helped others remember small comforts, how to breathe when they felt hurried, how to taste a sweet mango slice, like it was the only thing in the world for a moment, how to fold a blanket just so. Each small sharing made another friend smile and tucked the lesson like a seed into their heart. Midday brought a flurry of tiny visitors. A group of young starlings came down, eyes wide and full of questions. "How did you learn to help?" they asked in a rattle of eager voices. Sleepy Capy smiled slowly. "A friend taught me," he said. "And another friend. And another. We learned by doing little things together, over and over. When you help, you learn how warm it feels, and it makes you want to help again." Hope added, "And sometimes sharing what you are good at, like fast flying or quiet listening, means more than trying to do everything yourself." The starlings practiced sharing. One sang a short tune, while another counted seeds, and another kept watch for falling leaves. They learned quickly and left with bright feathers and wide, hopeful eyes. That afternoon, a long, low rumble rolled in from the far meadow. A cart had lost a wheel on the old path, and the child who drove it was trying to push it home, but was tired and worried the cart would break. The cart carried jars of jam, warm bread, and a large jar of golden honey destined for the market. Most importantly, tucked under a cloth in the cart, lay a wooden puppet made by a grandparent who wanted to give it as a present. The friends hurried. Sleepy Capy moved like a steady hill to brace the cart, while Laura and Swoop rolled the loose wheel back under and braced the axle with a strong twig. Hope and Tess gathered small leaves to make cushions to keep the jars from rattling and breaking. Pip kept the child's spirits bright with a silly rhyme. Kiko and Miri carried the warming jars with careful beaks and wings to keep them from tipping. When the puppet was safe and the jam jars snug, the child hugged the puppet and laughed through the worry. "Thank you," the child said, hugging Sleepy Capy's warm fur. "You saved my present." Sleepy Capy felt a simple, hearty happiness, the kind that swells quietly like a river finding its shape. The friends watched the carts roll away, leaving a trail of thankful smiles and a little ribbon tied to the mango tree. As evening fell, the sharing circle turned into a story night. Each friend took a turn to tell a small tale of a kindness they had seen. Brim the beetle clicked a story about how a forgotten grain got put back into a bird's nest and became the seed of a new song. Nook told of lost feelings finding homes again. Ori the owl told a slow tale of a night when the stars slipped and a meadow stitched them back with laughter. Then a soft, small voice rose from the edge of the circle. It was a little sparrow none of them knew well. She had come from beyond the hill and had watched them today. Her feathers were a little rumpled and her eyes shy. "I have nothing big to give," she admitted, "only a quiet, small thing. Once I sat on a fence and listened to someone crying. I hummed a tiny song until they smiled. Everyone leaned in. That little small thing, listening and humming until a smile returned, felt huge when held by all of them. They clapped softly, and Sleepy Capy nudged the sparrow's head with his paw, like giving a small medal. "Small things are everything," Hope whispered. "You just shared the greatest gift." That night, Sleepy Capy slept with his blanket folded and the pebble in his paw. He dreamed a neat dream where he and his friends made a long chain of hands and wings, each holding the next, travelling across meadows and rivers. In the dream, they passed on little things: a ribbon, a song, a pebble, a promise. Each thing gleamed with its own small light. Morning came with a new plan. Hope suggested they build a sharing box, an airy little spot beneath the friend feather tree, where anyone could leave something small for someone else. A painted pebble, a little song tied to a leaf, a tiny scarf, a seed packet. The friends thought it would be a place of surprise and delight, where strangers could give and receive without needing to ask. They built the box from a hollow stump and lined it with soft moss and paper leaves. Pip made tiny labels with friendly words. Take if you need, leave if you can. A small song inside. Tess made a silver smile swirl on the lid with quick flight. Sleepy Capy placed the first thing, a small pebble painted with a blue dot, and tucked the pebble into the box like starting a small bank of kindness. Word spread. Ants left tiny crumbs, and a beetle tucked in a shiny acorn cap. A child visiting the river left a folded paper boat with a wish. A travelling swallow dropped a feather and a note that said, "May the wind bring you soft days." The sharing box became a small festival every day. Sometimes people took more than they left, and sometimes they left more. It did not matter. The circle of giving kept flowing. One late afternoon, as the friends tidied the box, a new voice came, soft and polite, and a little shaky. An old fox who had never been to the meadow before walked up. He carried nothing but a tired look and a question in his eyes. May I take something?" he asked quietly. His whiskers twitched like he was afraid to make a loud step. Hope hovered close and sang a small, welcoming trill. "Of course," she said, and pointed with a wing to the label. "Take if you need." The fox picked a pebble painted with a tiny star. He turned it over in his paw, and then, with the gentlest voice, he said, "Thank you. I have walked a long path and I felt very alone. This will remind me I am not." Sleepy Capy nodded slowly. "Friends are not only those you see every day," he said. "Sometimes a small token can help a traveller remember they are part of a bigger, kind map." The fox sat and stayed until the moon rose, and then he left, holding the pebble like a small bright map. The friends watched him go and felt the simple truth settle. Sharing was not only giving things, it was making room for someone else to come and feel welcome. That night, under the soft stars, they counted small joys. The sharing box had become more than a stump. It was a mirror for their meadow's caring. Each small gift and each returned thing had made the meadow into a place where people and creatures felt seen. Sleepy Capy tucked his blanket and held the pebble the child had given him close. Hope hummed a small tune, and the friends fell into a soft, shared dream of giving hands and wings that could travel farther than they ever thought. Sleepy Capy and Hope, Friends of the Meadow. Part 6. The morning that began with what felt like a careful bow. The mango tree held its leaves like a green hand. The river hummed softer than usual, and Sleepy Capy woke with a feeling like a warm stone in his chest. He rubbed his eyes, folded his blue blanket just so, and found Hope already shining above him, wings ticking a bright little rhythm. "Today feels like a remembering day," Hope sang. "We should celebrate all the small things we have learned and shared." Sleepy Capy nodded slowly. Remembering was one of his favourite small jobs, like keeping a tiny lantern lit for friends who might forget how kind the world could be. Soon, the meadow filled with familiar shapes, Swoop drawing long ribbons in the air, Pip hopping and asking 100 small questions, Laura walking with calm steps, Kiko dipping his bright beak in the river with a splash, Tess and Miri sparkling like dusk and dew, Ori gliding in with soft round eyes, Brim clicking happily, Nook jingling his shell string, and many others, friends from near, and friends who had only once drifted through and decided to stay a while. They planned a gentle gathering. It would not be loud or grand, but it would be full. A place for small stories, for passing on little things, for reminding each other why they helped. The friend feather tree wore new ribbons and tiny lanterns from the sharing box. The promise book had a fresh cover leaf, and the cloud garden sent down a cool, grateful mist to keep everyone comfortable. First, they walked the kindness map. Sleepy Capy led slowly, and the birds made small music above. They visited the willow where Nook kept lost feelings, and gave him a new shiny shell for his string. They sat by Furrow's well and tested the rope one more time, each friend taking a gentle tug to feel how steady it was. At the seesaw near the oak, where Bristle, the hedgehog, had once been trapped, they set a small plaque of painted stones that said, "We lift together." At the garden, the first sprout had grown tall and hearty. Petra the stork, who had taught them the first sprout song, joined in a small ceremony. Each friend planted something tiny beside the carrot bed, an herb, a seed, a promise. Sleepy Capy planted a seed of marigold and hummed a slow song, "Let small things grow." The friends circled the garden, hands and wings touching leaves, feeling the gentle life between fingers and feathers. As the day slid into a warm honey of late afternoon, the Meadow Museum opened. It was not a museum with heavy doors, but a line of small displays under the friend feather tree. The sharing box showed its gathered treasures. A line of notes from the promise book fluttered on a string. The cloud garden hung little puffs of mist in jars that smelled like cool rain. Nook placed his shell string like a necklace of songs. Marn, the swallow, left the feather the flock had given her. Sleepy Capy placed the painted pebble and the child's folded paper boat he had kept. Jilly the gull brought a small shell that sang a tiny tune when the river lapped it, just so. Visitors strolled slowly from piece to piece. Some left their own small offerings, a button sewed to a ribbon, a scrap of cloth with a happy doodle. A new song whistled for the collection. Pip read a few of the old promise book notes aloud. Everyone clapped softly after each reading, not loud applause, but the kind that sounds like a ripple over warm water. As the sun leaned low, there came a moment of hush. A long-travelled crane and a handful of migratory swallows and swifts had returned, some to say goodbye as they flew on, some to visit and remember. The scene felt full of both hello and farewell, a soft braid of beginnings and endings. Sleepy Capy felt something like a small tug at his heart, the tender kind that tells you a page is turning. Hope fluttered to the centre and asked each friend to say one small thing they had learned. Swoop spoke of how a slow wind can teach more than a quick gust. Pip declared that questions are tiny keys. Laura said patience schooled them more kindly than hurry. Kiko reminded them that splashes can be invitations to play. Tess and Miri told stories of finding glow in little dark places. Nook shared how listening for lost feelings made him braver. Marn sang a short, wavering song about finding her tune again. Jilly offered a soft clap for the friends who taught her to fly in pieces. When it was Sleepy Capy's turn, he closed his eyes and hummed. His voice was low and slow, a note that spread like a warm blanket. "I have learned," he said, "that friendship is made of tiny stitches. Each small kindness is a thread. Stitch by stitch, the world becomes a place where anyone can belong." They all nodded. The friends sat together as the moon made its round basket in the sky. Pip fetched sweet mango, and Kiko sprinkled bright river pebbles that tasted like cold water to pass around. Hope told a new story about a cloud who learned how to tuckle and nap. Ori told a last slow story about stars being little homes for quiet wishes. Then came the part everyone had both hoped and quietly felt might be needed one day. Some friends would leave to travel, following long morning roads, high winds, or the pull of far seasons. Others would stay. They promised one another not just to meet again, but to keep their small lamps burning. The migrating birds who would fly onward gave gifts. A feather to hang on the friend feather tree, a song for Nook to tuck in his shell string, a map drawn with tiny strokes of where warm winds led. The friends who stayed gave gifts back, a pot of garden herbs for winter journeys, a little rope so travellers could tie bundles safe, and, most of all, a small sign planted at the meadow's edge reading, "This place remembers you." When the morning came for some goodbyes, the sky looked very big and very kind. Sleepy Capy and Hope walked the path to the hill with each friend who left, tucking small tokens into their wings or paws, a painted pebble, a care-wrapped seed, a strip of cloth with the promise book's leaf sewn inside. Hope whispered quick bell notes of courage. Sleepy Capy pressed a paw to each departing chest in a slow, warm press that felt like a promise itself. Travellers lifted into the air with new feathers and old memories, swifts and swallows cutting the horizon in eager V's, a falcon climbing with seaside maps tucked beneath one wing, a sleepy stork following the river's long curve. Sleepy Capy felt the meadow change shape with each friend who left. And he felt something else too. The meadow had been made by all of them. The leaving was not only a farewell, it was a sending of light into other places. After the leaving, the meadow rested in a soft, reflective hush. The friend feather tree shimmered with new ribbons and feathers. The sharing box brimmed with new surprises. The promise book had many new pages in new hands. Sleepy Capy and Hope walked slowly through their old, familiar routes. The willow where Nook sang, the well where Pharaoh kept watch, the garden where Petra's song once carried seeds into sprouting life. One evening, Sleepy Capy sat on his blanket and watched the stars dip and waltz. Hope landed, very tired, but very bright, and settled on his paw. "We have sewn a net," she said, voice small and happy. "It's strong." Sleepy Capy thought of the search for lost feelings, the mended songs, the rope that now hummed from Pharaoh's well, the seed left for a travelling fox, Marn's feather, Gilly's shell, the name in the promise book that said, "I will look after one small thing today." He smiled the slow smile that could warm a log, and nodded. "Yes, we have sewn a net." And in the quiet that followed, each friend, staying and going, kept small lamps lit. Sleepy Capy slept with the pebble the child had given him in his pocket. Hope dreamed in fluttering, tinkling notes. The Clue D garden rested its mist like pillows. The sharing box promised more treasures. The friend feather tree stood like a kindly old friend holding all the notes. Time behaved like a soft, steady drum. Seasons changed their shawls. new friends found the meadow. A jittery finch with a broken note, a beetle who had lost the name of his favourite path, a child who came to tie ribbons and ended up staying for a week to learn the names of mangoes. Each time new hands and wings found the meadow, the friends taught them the small ways: how to listen for a lost song, how to tie a gentle knot, how to fold a blanket for 2 naps, how to make a kindness map. As for Sleepy Capy, he kept doing what he had always done. He napped in sun patches, hummed low for friends who needed a calm, and made room under his blanket for those who wanted quiet. Hope kept ringing her tiny bell notes across the mango tree and the river bends, leading small rescue missions and teaching new hummingbirds the art of being bright and steady at once. The meadow became known beyond the hill, not as a place that solved everything at once, but as a place that remembered how to be kind. Travellers would pass through and carry a pebble or a song to another place, and, in that way, the small lamp of the meadow flickered into many other dark corners. The kindness map grew little by little, carried in the hearts of creatures who had learned how to knot patience to help. One soft, silver night, when the moon leaned in like a curious friend, the older animals gathered near the friend feather tree and read from the promise book. They read not like teachers instructing the young, but like people passing on a favourite quilt, each patch stitched with care. When the last page was turned, they sang a low, slow song together, a song about small threads and the kind web they had woven. Sleepy Capy felt the song in his bones. He realised that the world they had made was not tidy or perfect, but it was forgiving, warm and steady. It was made of hundreds of small, brave things: a rope fixed for a well, a feather given, a song mended, a garden tended, a sharing box filled, a pebble painted and passed on. Each small thing mattered because it joined to another. In the end, that is what the meadow taught them, that friendship is not a single great thing, but 1,000 small ones. It is the slow paw that steadies, the quick wing that scouts, the small song that lifts a heart, the listening ear that catches a falling tune. It is the decision, day after day, to be a place where anyone can come and find a light. Sleepy Capy and Hope sat under their mango tree and watched a sky full of travelling stitches, birds on journeys, stars on their slow turning paths, each one carrying something small and bright. Sleepy Capy yawned a long satisfied yawn, drew his blanket up under his chin, and felt as if the whole meadow hummed with tiny, steady beats. Hope tucked her head under a wing and whispered one last bell note before sleep. "Good night, friends, near and far." "Good night," Sleepy Capy answered slow and true, and the moon smiled as if tucking them in.